who has been very active, engaging stakeholders, both students, academics, and experts on the globe on topical issues relating to higher education and how we together can improve higher education in the face of this pandemic. And we are privileged today to come to you again with another exciting discussion on e-learning and open educational resources. And we have excellent experts and resource persons who are going to really discuss, give perspectives of the issues for you to understand wherever you have joined us. If you have joined us via Facebook, it is ASU, that is All African Student Union. You can keep your comments coming in and we'll read the comments for you as well. You can also contribute to the discussion if you have any relevant information that you want to share with everyone across the continent and the globe as well. Please get interactive with us and let us discuss this excellent topic that we have been given. I believe that COVID-19 is here with us, and I don't know when it's leaving, I don't know when it's going, but still education must go on. So universities may be locked down, but knowledge cannot be locked down. And so today we have excellent resource persons who are going to help us discuss this very important topic. But before we do that, we would kindly take a brief message from the Secretary General of the All Africa Student Union, and he is His Excellency Peter Kwesi-Kogye. Will give us a brief message of what they have been doing throughout the lockdown and what they seek to do even beyond the pandemic. Thank you so much, His Excellency. The floor is yours now. Please take over.
In the last couple of years is to open up education, to truly democratize education. And this implies making education inclusive as much as possible. And that means girls should not be prohibited from going to school simply on account of being a woman. And that also implies children, whatever their backgrounds, must have the right to education as a fundamental human right. The architecture of education, right from the colonial days, has been exclusive and continues to be. Professor Goski Alabi, who has joined us today for this webinar, a staunch advocate for online learning, has always believed that to reach a greater number of people, we cannot stick to the old ways of doing things. The brick and mortar classrooms come with the inherent limitation of capacity constraints. To truly reach the vast numbers, we need to utilize the power of technology and invest in tech for education. In a sense, I believe we'll look back one day and be grateful that the stark vulnerabilities and inequities have been brutally exposed in these difficult times. But it didn't have to take the COVID-19 to bring world leaders to see this obvious truth. As educational institutions embrace online teaching and learning, we ask, what are the key considerations that should drive policy? What are the key challenges to be expected? And what are the opportunities to be embraced to facilitate lifelong learning? All accounts point to the fact that online modes of teaching and learning will greatly disadvantage a lot of people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, with girls and marginalized children at risk more than any group. Today, via this webinar, we'll be looking to share the strengths of e-learning, and in the face of all the limitations we've seen during this pandemic, make an unfettered case for its continued use, even after the COVID-19. But why? Anecdotal evidence suggests that this is the only way we can truly reach the unreached and offer lifelong learning possibilities for everyone, leaving no one behind. In doing so, we'll be giving everyone the opportunity to have a good shot at making it in this life. I wish to thank all our speakers for accepting to join us today, who, in spite of their busy schedule, have made the time to join us. Mr. Bohen Shakwan from the UNESCO headquarters, Dr. Pan Friedman from the International Association of Universities, Professor Goski Alabi from the Lawe Open University, and Dr. Kosam Joseph from the Inter-University Council for East Africa. Please accept my gratitude. All our speakers are experts on this topic and have unparalleled experience in education. I wish to thank all my colleague student leaders on the panel who will be sharing with us their continued experiences of e-learning in a practical sense. Lena, Gaia, and Wamaka, thank you for accepting to join us today. Before I take my leave, I wish to introduce you to a number of initiatives ASU is involved in as our COVID-19 response. The 1 in 5 campaign is a global coalition of student and youth movements under the umbrella of the 100 million campaign, standing for the 1 in 5 living on less than $2 a day. The aim of the campaign is to specifically ask world leaders to commit 20% of the government funds allocated to the coronavirus recovery to support the needs of the 20% most marginalized and excluded children and their families, to make sure that companies and businesses are paying their fair share towards supporting these families through paying their taxes and respecting human rights in their business practices. Until the UN General Assembly in September, we will be standing together through the 100 million campaign to demand justice for every child. We are asking our national unions, youth leaders, civil societies, and religious groups to join the campaign to press home these demands to our leaders. We know and have evidence that our collective action can move decision makers to make the right decisions. For a start, sign the petition at 100million.org/demand justice. Also, we encourage you to write a letter to your member of parliament, to your mayor, or anyone you believe holds a decision-making capacity, and ask them to make the right decisions, to give justice to every child, to have a decent opportunity to make it in this life. You will find more information about the campaign on our Facebook page. Our national unions have stood tall in these difficult times. They have engaged in direct interventions to complement the efforts of our various governments. Some have distributed food to those who cannot afford. Some have tended to the sick. Some are producing PPEs and sanitizers at their universities. And still others have lobbied their government and private sector, especially the telecommunications companies, to make internet data available at a reduced cost to students to enable them to continue their education. All these we have done by recognizing a huge deficit in our efforts. We need your support to help our unions to do much more. To donate, please visit our Facebook page at All Africa Students Union for more information. Thank you, and continue to stay safe.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Peter Kwesi-Koji, for that brief and very excellent remarks that you have shared with us today. And it's very important that throughout this pandemic, no child is left behind, no matter the circumstances, no matter the challenge, everyone deserves that opportunity to be educated. Thank you so much once again. You can join the conversation via social media platforms. All our platforms are available. It is All African Student Union. Kindly let your comments come in and we will share on the platform for everyone to see. Next, to give us a beautiful keynote address, we are privileged to have Bohin Chakron, and he is the Director, Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems, UNESCO, based in France. Mr. Bohin, the floor is yours. We are ready to receive your keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. They're Secretary General of All African Student Union, their student leaders, their panelists, their participants, sisters and brothers from around the continent. It's a pleasure to be connected virtually with you today. Thank you to the All African Student for this initiative. Today's event shows that youth and student union and movement in Africa is vibrant. Dear colleagues, as schools and universities began to close in quick succession last month, UNESCO's action holds in 3 words: learning never stops. We stood to ensuring continuity for the 1.5 billion learners affected. This includes 200 million students at the tertiary level. In Africa, around 330 million children and young people were affected by the school and university closing. A very recent survey of UNESCO university chairs found that internet connectivity, social isolation, general anxiety, and financial concerns were considered among the top challenges facing learners studying remotely. Everywhere, the most disadvantages are the hardest hit, from the youngest age to higher education learners. Inclusion, equity, and partnerships are at the heart of our response. As the UN agency leading education, including higher education, UNESCO has launched a global education coalition and is forging new alliances to support countries and leave no one behind. Dear colleagues, we have entered into an entirely new teaching and learning paradigm. It is accelerating change in education and higher education, but also bringing inequalities into stark light. The first major challenge is one of the connectivity. Half students affected by closure don't have access to household computer, and 43% do not have internet at home. This encompasses the tertiary level, of course. In Africa, around 89% of learners do not have access to home computers, and 82% do not have internet. In addition, while mobile phones can allow learners to access information, to connect with each other and with their teachers, around 25 million learners live in places not serviced by mobile networks, even if the continent is the one where the growth rate of mobile phone subscriptions is the fastest in the world. Even if most countries are deploying blended approaches of high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech solutions, we know that this crisis is interrupting the learning journeys for millions of children and youth, including at the tertiary level. At UNESCO, we are working to widen access and ensure free connection to the portals and education resources of the Global Coalition members, as well as those used by ministries of education and beneficiary countries across the continent. For example, we work with our partner Orange through its subsidiaries, and they have created mobile data plans dedicated to educational services references in Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, and 5 other countries in the region will come: Cote d'Ivoire, Madagascar, Cameroon, Liberia, and Botswana. Dear colleagues, the second challenge is the readiness of teachers and faculties. An online survey conducted by UNESCO in 60 countries finds that around 64% of teachers do not have the skills to conduct distance education, placing them under considerable pressures. At the tertiary level, we also know that those on temporary contracts and without the tools to teach online are particularly vulnerable. The third challenge is a more ethical dimension. How are online content quality assured? In a technology-mediated learning environment, how is the security and privacy of learners and their personal information is protected? Do we have in the continent the right regulatory framework for distance and online education? These are not new considerations, but they take a new urgency in the current context, calling for strengthened global governance, but also for action by the key stakeholders, including student union. At the same time, we believe at UNESCO that the global and regional cooperation is the only answer to this crisis, especially to support countries that don't have the capacity, know-how, and resources to deploy distance learning. Partnership exemplifies the spirit of the Global Education Coalition I mentioned earlier. We brought together close to 100 multilateral, non-profit, civil society, and private partners to offer one platform for an articulated response and synergies. The Global Coalition aims to pool expertise, technology, and talent to help countries design and deploy learning solutions that are inclusive and equitable. The coalition will act to defend universal access and equitable solutions, with emphasis on free support, tools, and services. This is not just about responding to a global crisis now, but I think all of us know, and the Secretary General in his introductory remark mentioned that, we need to build more resilient higher education system in the future. Education, we know it will be affected and transformed by this pandemic. As we potentially progressively exit from the crisis, governments should see higher education as an integral to their economic and social recovery. We'll be organizing a webinar next month on higher education to which we would like to convey invitation to you. But we believe that universities are at the vanguard of the transformation required to build back on more resilient and cooperative foundation. This means public support for tertiary institutions to leave no student behind, defend public research and innovation, and encourage transdisciplinary approaches to unlock the solutions that we all look for. From an international perspective, the use of technology to promote internationalization in education may also be a successful strategy in the aftermath of the COVID crisis, enhancing recognition of higher education qualification, and for the continent, implementing the Addis Ababa Convention for recognition of higher education qualification. But it's also about mobility at home and the role of the digital platform and resources in reinforcing knowledge and resources sharing, peer learning, networking, and enrollment across borders. In the face of the closing of the borders, unfortunately, and a lack of resources to travel, reducing mobility within and across countries, and the deglobalization of the economies. As the late President Houphouët-Boigny had so well thought out, Africa must not miss the digital revolution, which remains, we believe, largely within its reach. Any dollar spent on equipping the excluded today with connected digital equipment and energy kits will be useful in the future, given the uncertainty over the future of the pandemic. But it's important for resilience building and reimagining education and higher education in the future. We believe that it's time to work collectively for the future resilience of education system to the same localized shocks that are becoming more and more legion, for example, with climate change, and you mentioned that also earlier. Looking in the future, I know, and from my reading and from the contact with the All African Student Commitment, I know your commitment to the Sustainable Development Goal and SDG 4. I think you have to firmly continue committing to those goals. They remain valid for all of us. It is also on the basis of knowledge, innovation, and professional training generated in the university that we'll find solution to the defining challenges of our time, for planet, for peace and prosperity. It is also more than ever essential that the global community comes together now to foster universal access to information and knowledge through the open educational resources. And it's important when we are speaking about distance learning that we speak about open educational resources. This is a matter of what we think a societal responsibility. The global pandemic crystallizes our interdependence and vulnerability as much as our capacity for creativity, innovation, and solidarity. I hope our discussion today will pave the way for new collaborations between students, universities, member states, and UNESCO to ensure the world comes of the crisis more aware and better prepared and more committed to shaping secure and sustainable common destiny. A last word is that you, as All Africa Student Union, I would like to invite you to join the global coalition that we set up. I hope your voice will be loud to protect the right to education, the financing of education sector, and the student voice in policies and strategic choices. Thank you for inviting me today, and I look forward for a close discussion and collaboration with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bohin Chakron, for that excellent remarks as well. I believe that our participants are already filing in their questions and some comments based on our presentation. But I think you really positioned our discussion today in the right direction by giving us few challenges. And I know, and I'm very confident that our resource persons are going to provide some remedies and answers and what they think we should be able to do as a continent based on the statistics that you were able to give us. But let me ask you, even before we let you go as a keynote speaker, you mentioned a lot of challenges, but I have picked out 4 which are very key. And among the 4, I would like to ask you, how do we ensure that our teachers are really ready for this new paradigm in our teaching and learning? For example, we know that most of our teachers were not trained using online resources, and I confidently believe that online teaching is not just a small skill. It is a great skill that everyone must acquire to be excellent at it. What is UNESCO doing in terms of capacity building for all academics on the continent to be excellent at using the online teaching approach? And also you raised a key issue on quality assurance, which I know some key institutions on the continent are trying their best possible to assure quality in the usage of these online resources. But if you can really give us your intervention as UNESCO on the first point, it will be very good for us. Thank you. Our resource persons, I believe they will do justice to the rest of the key issues.
Thank you. Thank you for offering me the opportunity to add additional element. I tried to stick to the time that we had. I think we are acting on 3 directions as UNESCO. One, through the Global Education Coalition, we have mobilized a large number of organizations that are offering for free teacher training. And these ranges from Coursera to Khan Academy to Microsoft to other partners that are offering learning opportunities for teachers. And we are working with the government to ensure enrollment of teachers in this training. Second, our institute based in Addis Ababa called ICBA, International Institute for Capacity Building, is organizing a large number of webinar teacher training, and some of them are coming, which will focus, as you rightly said, it's not only digital skills, it's the application of digital skills in remote learning, and it's also pedagogical aspect. And I think we should take into account an important aspect I alluded to it very quickly, is that the solution that countries are adopting are encompassing high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech. And part of the work we have been doing is also how to ensure that radio, TV programs are also put at disposal and mobilized. In many countries, like in Senegal, there is an education channel in Tunisia and other countries. So I think it's important that in the discussion today, we don't think only about the high-tech solutions, because the high-tech solutions probably will benefit few. But we think that we need to have an inclusive approach, and the high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech solution have to be kept in mind. The last point is about connectivity. And part of the work that we have been trying to do is connectivity is a complex matter. It can be an example, as I mentioned, a zero-rate access to fee for access to education data. Many telecom operators have engaged to that, be it at a global level, for example, through the coalition. I mentioned Orange, but there is Vodafone, there are others. But it also at the country level. I know in Rwanda, for example, there is an agreement with the local operator, many in other countries. So I think connectivity is about, of course, access to internet, but connectivity is also about equipment and devices, because it's not it's not useful to access to internet if you don't have the right device to allow you to engage in learning. And the third is of course the digital skills that are required to navigate the connectivity and benefit and have a meaning for the connectivity. And again, we are working with different partners to scale up the access to internet, to use satellite companies also to cover some areas that are not covered, use innovative areas, ideas like the nano servers, blend renewable energy and access to connectivity, having different hotspots, etc. So we are working, but I have to be very honest and frank. Some of the solution can be done very quickly, and we have been able to work, for example, very quickly in Senegal. But in other countries, the investment and the infrastructure will require, first of all, much more resources and more time. And that's what is important in our discussion today. We need to think about phased approach. Not everybody will have connection to internet tomorrow morning. That should be our goal, but our strategy should be inclusive of the different situation, different realities across the continent. I hope I responded to your question and remain at disposal, of course. Please.
Very well, Mr. Shakron, you did justice to the question. I believe that you will be able to stay throughout the discussion to respond to some of the pertinent and important questions and contributions that participants will be giving. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the knowledge you shared with us. Great. We will be moving on to introduce our great panel members for us today. And the first to be introduced, we have already shared the link that has all their bio data, but we would want to just take you through who they are quickly. The first who will be speaking to us today is Professor Goski Alabi, and she is the president, Lawe Open University, based in Ghana. And Lawe Open University is the first open university in Ghana. And if my statistics or my fact is right, it is the second in West Africa as well. The next who will speak to us is Dr. Pam Fredman, and she is the president, International Association of Universities. She would give us a perspective of what international universities must do in this pandemic and beyond. Dr. Kosam Joseph, he is a chief principal, quality assurance and quality framework inter-university council for East Africa based in Uganda. He will also share with us some key issues that we need to take into consideration around quality assurance and accreditation, and some very vital information we need to do if we really want to stick to online teaching and learning. Ms. Padmini Gaya, she is the Vice President, Council of Students and Youth Movement of Mauritius. She will also give us some perspective of what students have been doing around this time and how supportive they have been to their universities in curbing the pandemic and also kind of migrating to the online teaching and learning and how far they have come. And finally, we would also be hearing from Ms. Lina Folabi, and she is also the Vice President, Central Africa for All Africa Student Union. So without wasting much time, I would want to invite Professor Goski Alabi. Professor Goski, are you ready?
I am.
Great. So, Prof, we are so glad that you could join us today, despite your tight schedule. And you are a great academic on the continent, and we have worked with you throughout the years till now. Before you became the president of Lawe Open University, you were one of the finest and best academic in one of the best universities in Ghana, so University for Professional Studies. And you did you introduced a lot of innovation into the teaching and learning and even management. I remember your total quality management issues and in UPSA. But let me ask you, why or what inspired you years back? Because we have been discussing issues concerning open learning, open educational resources 4, 5, 6 years ago before we all got ourselves hooked up with COVID. Did you have any vision that this will happen and that you establish this great university, Lawe Open University in Ghana?
Yes, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you. I hope my camera is working well. I would also like to add my voice to congratulating ASU for putting together this webinar and to thank all the panelists. Indeed, I had envisioned something like that. I had envisioned, but not in the same way. I envisioned social justice in education because of my own experiences, with respect to the fact that I was almost robbed of my ambition to have higher education. I was therefore driven by an Africa that at least every child would have the opportunity to test higher education in a learning environment that made the learning very useful to that child or to that learner and to society. I also envisioned an education where no one was left behind, irrespective of one's age, irrespective of one's gender, location, or social status. I envisioned way before we had the agenda, the SDG 4, I envisioned an inclusive, equitable, and equal access to all who were desirous of higher education. Because I realized early enough that higher education was the change maker. When we look at the gross enrollment ratios across the world, we realize that the countries that are very well developed are those with gross enrollment ratios of something above the region of 70. Whereas in Africa, our gross enrollment ratio at the tertiary level is almost about 10%, if not less. So with this, I started thinking about the fact that it is possible that there is a relationship between higher education and the development of a country. And obviously, that fact is not disputed. But then I realized that there were some kind of obstacles. There were obstacles to equitable education. There were obstacles to access to education, particularly at the tertiary level. And I realized early enough that there was hope in change. And I saw that hope in two different forms. I saw the first form of change in the demographical change. I realized that we had moved from the 20th century to the 21st century, and the demography had changed along. We had moved from the baby boomers all the way to the generation XYZ, and now in the 21st century, we have the millennials that had been ushered education. I thought that technological mediated education much earlier was going to force us because of the demographics, because of the demographical change. But here we are, COVID has compelled us, whether prepared or unprepared, to see the worth in online or digital learning. The challenge that I foresee, the risks associated with this kind of situation and compulsion and the complexities is that where we are not very careful, we would have a situation where, because we have to wake up to the new realization, we would go into it unprepared. And it is often said that when you are standing in the thorns, you don't try to uproot the thorns. You have to stop and consider the best way out. Otherwise, you would only sink deep into the thorns, which would even create more undesirable conditions. So it is important that we begin to look at the situation in a way that we do not rush into this new normal that everybody must get onto the bandwagon of open and distance learning, to undermine the quality of something very beautiful that has the potential to truly transform Africa, that has the potential to transform our economies and give us what we desire. Because it is not only classroom education that makes the difference, but skills development and digital learning has the ability to help us combine workplace learning, life experiences with the formal type of education. And so I feel that these were some of the things that actually encouraged me, that actually pushed me, that actually gave me sleepless nights about 10 years ago, starting in 2009, to ensure that we started digital education in the University of Professional Studies, and also to establish the first private open and distance education or open education .
All right. I believe Professor Goski is still online. Prof, are you still online? Are you still speaking?
That we could undermine the quality. So this is where I believe I would like to pause for now, and then when I have the second round, I can dig and delve into some of the practical things that we could do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Goski, for the brief submission that you've made. You made mention of key questions, and then you raised pertinent stuff for consideration. But we'll come to you for the second round, especially to tell us what you have been doing as a member of the African Council for Distance Education, that you've laid down to ensure that we are able to move in this direction as a continent. But we would want to bring in Dr. Padman-Friedman, and she is also going to give us a perspective of what universities are doing internationally. For example, we have interviewed a lot of experts, and they believe that COVID is with us. And for us, even in Africa, it is not only COVID that we have battled with before. And so, for example, when you go to Nigeria, we have had issues of Boko Haram, where universities in northern parts of the country had to cut short their education. We've also had issues of civil wars and some pandemics before, like Ebola, when Ebola happened. Now, experts have the view that as a continent, we should have alternative source of teaching and learning. So for example, every university must have learning management system, or must adopt or adapt the open education as an approach, so that in case of any pandemic, we are not now going to look for avenues to migrate teaching and learning. What is your take on that, and what experience would you share with us as a continent? If you are ready, you can take over the platform, Dr. Padman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. thank you for the invitation to see that you as a student organization arranged this. Coming from a country like Sweden, where students have a very, very important platform in higher education for many years, I see this is a good sign. I think I will leave a global view on what we have seen from the pandemic and from the International Association of University. And as you know, we have done a survey from the organization to go out and see that was happening in between March and April to see what is going on around the world. So we have to face the fact that the ongoing pandemic was very different, developed in different parts of the world. So one has to see the consequences. So, of course, there is immediate and very dramatic effect by the pandemic on higher education everywhere. And I will come back with more details in the second round, as you said. And this survey, I will say also, I mean, we will have to follow what's going on around the world and also, of course, in Africa, because you were a very good responder. So there is already a plan to have a second round in October and then a third round in 2021 to see for higher education and what has happened due to the COVID and for the future of higher education. This pandemic absolutely illustrates the global impact of challenges and that are to be met in the Sustainable Development Goals, which has been raised already, and the Agenda 2030. And also the impact of education, because UN has strongly declared, and I think that all sitting here also stands behind, that higher education has a key role for all and each society to reach those goals, and also for the future of knowledge distribution around the world. So what lessons have the pandemic taught us about the education? You said that you have already experienced in Africa, of course, closure, but I think that in general around the world, the closure, which was to prevent spread of virus and severe health consequences, stopped educations on campuses. And according to the survey, 90% of higher educations around the world in the different regions are responding that they have partially or completely closed their campuses. And actually the highest percentage in the answer is in Africa, and that's 77% reporting that they have partially or completely closed their campuses. And of course, this has not short-term consequences on education. It will take a long time and will not be recovered just after the lockdown is over. And as you said, you have experienced this before. It's also clear that the closure led to 2/3 of the responding higher education institutions went from campus to online education. And as also have been said, of course, we have been waiting and we have been looking for transformation to more online, and that is expected to open up the access of higher education, but also it's been very much talked about for the lifelong learning, which will be important for all countries around the world. But it has been slow, very slow, but now there was a push, as the former speaker said, and there was no choice than to go online. However, there are a lot of lessons learned, and I might come back in the second round of this, and it also some of these issues has been raised, but there are lessons to be learned, and I think that we can learn from each other. And from other meetings I have attended, it's clear that there is not saying higher education is not saying that they're going online completely, but that we will see much more of blended learning, and there is many reasons to have that, and that I would like to come back to. One major concern is the inequality, which is seen by the effect of the pandemic. And the inequality is very rapidly seen in the possibilities to go online and to give students possibilities to take their exams, to do their studies, and for the quality of these online studies. On the positive side from the survey, which I want to raise, is that more than half of the responding institutions, they announce that they have an increased interaction with and recognition by their governments and by their society. Unfortunately, not in all countries, and less in Africa than in other regions. It's also saying that staff and students are being involved, in particular in society engagement. And in our point of view, and my own point of view, I think this is a good sign of possibly regaining trust to science and proven experience, and the resource that higher education provides, and not at least for education, which brings knowledge through our students to all sectors in society. And that leads me to a comment on your question on what is needed to ensure that no one is left behind. It's a very difficult question, and we shouldn't hide that it comes to resources. But cooperation, building mutual trust between higher education institutions and higher education organizations, politicians, and stakeholders to promote and see the necessity of research and education all over the world is needed. And the voice of the students, I think, is crucial, because you are your next generations of employees, policy, and decision maker. And that voice is important, driving the forces for getting a good situation for higher education. So hopefully an increased cooperation and trust will open the eyes of governments to actually financially invest in higher education and higher education for all, and also to be able to prioritize this in time of economical restraints. Philanthropy, business investment will be there, and that will be other resources for the higher education, but that will not cover the needs for having all included in higher education for the future. And also, as been discussed here, and which I would like to come back to, and that is going online, being more digital will cost money and investments in infrastructure. Finally, this part, the governments from 193 countries have ratified Agenda 2030. And with that, they have taken responsibility. And I hope that we can share experience and learn from each other to jointly promote the need of higher education, and that it's higher education for all and all around the world. So I stop there with the first round.
Thank you so much. That is very excellent information you've given. We'll come back to you definitely when we move on to the next steps. But one critical issue that is missing out of the context of the discussion, and that is where Dr. Kossam comes in. For example, we have been holding series of engagement and meetings with national accreditation institutions and quality assurance institutions on the continent. And the key issue they raise is that universities, when they were submitting their course programs and everything for accreditation, it was a face-to-face interaction. So for example, I submitted face-to-face interaction, course materials and everything, and not online. And all of a sudden, universities are going online. So in terms of quality, how do you graduate someone whose content has not been assured by the national regulatory body? And I think it's a huge issue we must be able to solve. And in Nigeria, for example, again, their national regulatory body raised this flag, and in Ghana as well, and I believe in most of the African countries. As the Director for Quality Assurance, Dr. Kossam, what have you been doing as IECA, and what do you think we should be able to do as a continent? Thank you. You can take over, Dr. Kossam, if you hear me.
Yeah. So the someone else coming in? No? I think
yes,
that
Dr. Kossam is speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. And it's my great honor to be invited to be a panelist on this very important topic on COVID effect on higher education. I think the question that you have raised to me is a very pertinent and very interesting one. And of recent, at least in East Africa, we have been discussing this. Looking at our mandate as a regional body, we provide advisory, but we work very closely together with regulatory bodies. The issue of quality assurance of online or distance education has become a very important topic, especially for regulatory bodies in East Africa. That traditionally, of course, we are looking at the face-to-face. But now that if you look at the issue of COVID, one would say this has caught us pants down. We are not prepared for that. But in East Africa, the regulatory bodies in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, they have already started developing regulations focusing on quality assurance of online or e-learning or open or distance education. And to that effect, I would also encourage, I'm not very much aware whether you are aware of the existence of the African Council for Distance Education, ACDE. I've worked with them very closely. They have what they call the quality toolkit, which is very comprehensive, which I would advocate for higher education institutions in the continent to adopt those toolkit, ensure that the delivery of higher education at the continent at least meets the minimum quality assurance attributes for ensuring that the teaching and learning meets the minimum quality expectation of our stakeholders in the region. But otherwise, I think it's the right time, it's an opportunity for all our higher education institutions in the continent to adopt or to customize the quality assurance aspect of the ACDE. And also we have to benchmark, because this is not only a problem of Africa. We have to benchmark what other places in the world are moving towards ensuring quality of delivery of e-learning or distance learning. That is my contribution to this topic.
Great, Dr. Kosam, I don't want to push you to the wall, but I think let me give you this follow-up question as an expert.
Yes.
Whether we like it or yes, this is where we are now as a continent. We must adopt open learning as much as we are doing face-to-face and whatever.
Yeah.
What is your take on that, and what key message, because this is a policy webinar, which at the end of the day will be shared with ministers of education and all. What would be your key message that you will share with the entire continent ministries of education?
I think the issue of moving from the traditional face-to-face to e-learning or online, it needs really mindset change. I'm sorry to say, if you look at the profile of our majority of our professors across the continent or in our universities, they need a lot of first sensitization, changing the mindset that now we have to move from the traditional delivery, and they should also be prepared for capacity building, because not everybody who is a professor is able to develop content which will fit the e-learning or online learning. So we need at least to have a policy at a national level, policy at institutional levels, so that will capacitate building the capacity of our institution to do e-learning. For example, I think the keynote speaker mentioned the issue of quality of delivery content development. Not everybody is able to package the material according to what is expected for effective learning on e-learning. So we need to do a lot of policies and the capacity of our institution to be able to ensure that all our professors in our universities are able at least to be able to translate or to package the material what they have at the current face-to-face to fit into the e-learning platforms.
All right, thank you very much. We'll let you hold your breath now. We'll come back to you when we get to the next round. But
okay,
we are privileged to have one of our student leaders, and that is Padmini. Padmini, we want to hear from you. When universities were trying to move online and adopt to the e-learning issues, what has been the overview of universities in Mauritius? Can you share with us what the universities have adopted in terms of making sure no one is left behind, making sure that we adhere to quality principles in the entire discussion? Can you give us an overview? What has been going on in Mauritius amongst the universities?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this question. And before starting, I'd like to thank ASU for giving me this opportunity to share my views among the audience here. Well, it is an undeniable fact that, COVID-19 has taught us quite a few lessons, and there is also a need to change mindset here. Okay, it's a global issue. It's not only in Africa, but it's a global issue. This virus may sound to be very invisible, but yet its destructive spread in the globe, including Africa, is not to be ignored. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, as everyone has stated, it has affected millions or billions of people in the world, okay? Increased poverty, decreased economic growth, and caused so many disastrous effects in the world. Talking about Mauritius, how we are coping with this? Well, to start with the educational sector, the primary and the secondary educational sector, it's going quite smoothly. Okay, to be frank, it's going quite smoothly, where children are being given online teaching and learning through radio, through the broadcasting on the national television. For the secondary levels, the educators takes the responsibility. Okay, so as from grade 10 onwards, the educator conducts online classes on different software, like we have the Zoom software, we have Google Classroom, we also have Microsoft TeamViewer. Okay, we also have TeamViewer, which we're using, and the government is giving training to educators how to use Microsoft TeamViewer or Microsoft 365 software and so on. So training is being given on that. But the major issue which is faced here is that there was a lack of preparedness. Okay, I think this has been noted in all the countries. We have not been given training, before. So probably before starting with a sudden online teaching and learning setting, we could have had probably 1 week of preparatory work, where educators, students could have been more involved with the software, get to know the shortcomings and how it functions in real life. And then later on, we start the teaching and learning, process. So in that situation, probably learners would not have had so many complaints, because here in Mauritius, if we take example of students, okay, of secondary students, there's a lot of complaint coming in because they're not acquainted with this software. They have not been given proper training. If we take examples of tertiary students, they don't have that much of problem because they are more mature. They know how to handle software. If we take example in universities like the Open University of Mauritius, it's already an open distance learning university. So students are already acquainted how to use Zoom. They're already being given, a task online. So for them, it's not a great deal, it's not a big issue for them. But for secondary students, yes, it becomes quite a big problem because they're not acquainted. No training has been given. It's only now that we have training sessions and webinars by different stakeholders, taking place. But I fear that it's a bit too late because some of these students are already, demonstrating a very low response since months. I'm in the education sector, I'm a secondary educator. I can see that my students have a low response because we have not been able to grab the attention since the beginning. That might be a huge problem, which we don't really face on the tertiary level. Of course, we have students' unions in universities, but there is a lack of student voice. The student union is here, but is there a way, is there strategy to empower them? Do they have an appropriate platform where they can voice out, the constraints that they are facing during this time? I don't think, we still have it, or probably we're not ready to hear their voice because we don't have that strategy, to come with solutions. So this is the reality which we're facing here in Mauritius, and I think globally. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
That is exciting and insightful as well, especially bringing in and also the basic education as well, and how they are trying to kind of combat some of these issues. It's the right direction, but we'll come back to you. And even now, your follow-up question, I think I will pose it to Lena. And Lena, you would agree with me that throughout the period when universities announced that they were going online with teaching and learning and even assessment, students were agitated. In Ghana, for example, student leaders had to meet management and come up with amicable solutions. And it's been fantastic the way the engagement went. And now I think across all the universities in Ghana, it's been peaceful. And Egypt as well, we've seen that collaboration between universities and student leaders, making sure that they address issues in terms of quality, no one is left behind, and stuff like that. But when the issue came, students were panicking, they were throwing a whole lot of information. What was the experience for your university, and what has been done, especially in your position as the Vice President for All African Student Union? What has been the student experience and engagement? Lena, if you hear me well, you can take the platform.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me, please?
Perfectly.
Okay, I'm Lena Folabi, as you all know. I am a PhD student in higher education management at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Currently, I'm stuck because of the COVID. Like we've all heard, affecting everyone. We are all stuck where we are. But the good thing is that we are able to communicate online. We have all moved online. My university as well has moved online. We have been able to go on with our cohort meetings, and it's been going on well. My university has also responded by providing free data to students so that we are able to study online without any problem. What lesson have I learned from this, or what lesson has this pandemic taught us about education is that we need to reimagine our education, the curriculum and pedagogy. We need to re-innovate because there's this digital divide that exists, especially in Africa. For us to do this, we must ensure that all the required infrastructures are available. The connectivity must reach the remotest and poorest communities, because access to technology and the internet is no longer luxury. We need it. I'll also say that there's a need. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my. Okay, I'll also say that there's a need for us to empower our communities, because it is said that if it takes a village to raise a child, we must empower that village to teach the child. Improving the education system requires a decentralized, democratic, community-based approach where community ownership of education is cultivated. So I think with that, if you work, the students are able to work in synergy with the environment, it will help us to be able to overcome such situation. It's true that the COVID-19 is something that took us unawares. We were not prepared, but the university as a whole needs to anticipate. For instance, I would say that there's a gap in our research for such crisis, because if we had anticipated that we could have a crisis of this magnitude, probably we wouldn't be here today. Maybe we would have had a solution better off than this, where we are able to study without any problem. But I think that if we are able to increase the level of technology in our various universities, then I think we are able to overcome the challenges that we are facing today. So in order that no child is left behind, we have to ensure that we move to the remotest areas by using probably the e-flyers. We use outreach campaigns. We create digital centers where free internet in those communities, like in the suburbs. There's another issue, the issue of electricity in Africa, which is a problem. We can be going on with this webinar, suddenly there's blackout. So how do we continue? If we are in the classroom, for instance, if I'm having a class online with my supervisor and like
Hello, Lina.
Yes.
Great. Please proceed.
Yeah, I think I'm done for now. I'll probably take again for the next round. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you raised a very important aspect, and that is research. How is research being conducted within this period? If you are on the field to gather data, how has it affected your entire research process? But I believe that the discussions are not just ending. People are still deliberating and looking out for credible ways to engage universities' mandate, teaching, learning, community service. Going forward, we also need to even engage our telcos as well. I'm sure All Africa Students Union will pick it up, engage the telcos on the continent very well in the webinar to explain to us, because throughout the discussion, we are hearing the fact that we need to have internet access and connectivity even to the remotest areas on the continent. But what does it take to do that, or to get that done? I think we need to do that as well. But we'll go to the second round questions before we come in with the views and comment from our participant. And each panel member has just 5 minutes to respond to this, because they want to really respond to some of the questions coming from the floor as well. You will agree with me that e-learning, open access education, open resource, whatever, is with us, and that is the new revolution, and that is what must be done. We cannot mince words about that, and what it takes, or what it is for us to do now, is to adopt strategic measures to combat all the challenges we have outlined. For example, we've outlined issues of internet, we've outlined issues of devices, we've outlined issues of electricity. Let me go to Professor Goski.
Sorry. I'm told that my microphone
online,
was on. Yes. So first of all, I did say that from the ACD point of view, we had Dr. Kossam speaking to the issue in a way. Firstly, the ACD has the quality toolkit, which is available for institutions to adopt or adapt and use. Secondly, we also have the ACDE providing capacity building opportunities for institutions on the continent. ACD is also a member of the ICDE, which is the International Council for Distance Education, and policy frameworks and guidelines to help institutions work with or migrate, transition effectively into the open and distance environment. But let me say that I have a 5-point recommendation that I believe that we can use to improve our transition into open and distance learning. Firstly, I believe that African governments need to realize that technology-mediated education is inevitable. It is the new normal, and therefore there is need to change our minds about it. We need to shed those negative perceptions that we had about open and distance education in the past, particularly before COVID-19. The second point I want to make is that African governments need to consciously build public confidence in e-learning, because it has been portrayed as though e-learning is inferior to the traditional brick and mortar form of education. And this is really undermining the acceptability of open and distance learning. I would also like to add to this particular point that it is important for us to recognize that e-learning is only a mode of teaching. It is not a form, a different form of education. It is the same way somebody would go and stand in the class and lecture. People could use technology to assist them, facilitate the learning process. Open education is slightly different from e-learning. It encompasses e-learning, but it is not e-learning. E-learning, it's a learning methodology or approach. The third point that I would like to make is that governments need to invest in e-learning. And in this regard, I believe that governments need to invest very heavily in IT infrastructure and ensure that internet in particular is one available, is accessible to all, is reliable, and it is affordable. This is critical if we need to work effectively with open and distance learning. The fourth intervention that I would like to mention is the need for us to build capacity. And it is, I believe it is the institution's responsibility to build capacity of their faculty to use the technological approaches, principles, and devices. It also means that there is need to look again at our educational philosophies, because for long, pedagogically, it has been teacher-led, teacher-centered, teacher-dependent form of education. There is need to move away from that teacher-dependent approach to education to a more student-focused education where the student is the center of the learning process. And this means that philosophically, we need to move away from teaching to learning facilitation. Now, that requires a lot of capacity building, reorientation, and retooling, because learning facilitation is in principle and philosophically very different from teaching. The last point I would like to raise is the need for all of us to do the change management. The change management process is indeed extremely critical, because we are seeing over and again resistance, particularly from students and also from faculty who are not used to this new normal, not wanting to adopt the technology-mediated education or e-learning. So we need to let them understand what is in it for them, the benefits they stand to gain. I remember recently there was one of the universities in Ghana where the students were threatening to take the management to court if they forced them to go online or to write online examination. And as I was interacting with some of the people involved in the process, I asked them, have you done the change management well enough? The sensitization? Have you made the students understand what is in it for them? For example, if they have to use their own money, which should not be the case, to buy data, because government should make sure that these things are available. Have they compared that with paying for transportation every day to campus, so forth and so on? So once that was done, the students who were resisting, saw the benefit in it for them, and then they changed. Lastly, let me end by saying that it is time for governments across Africa to come up boldly and declare one student, one computer with active internet. in addition to radio, television, and tablets with solar systems, support. Because there are tablets which run on solar, which come preloaded with content, and there is a way of using apps to ensure that the content are renewed from time to time. Governments need to take that bold step and reprioritize education, particularly the resources, e-resources, and the hard resources that are required for open and distance education in Africa. To end, let me say it is time for Africa to de-emphasize certification in favor of useful and applied learning for all. And technology is the way to go. Once again, thank you very much. I'm Professor Goski Alabi, President, Lawa Open University, and the West African representative of the African Council for Distance Education, the chair of the African Network for Internationalization of Education. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Professor Goski. That is so excellent. At least you give us some way forward for us to think through, even with government. In fact, you have really outlined most of the interventions for the government. And I would want Dr. Padman to just give us what universities must do. So for example, we have universities that are giving out data bundles to students. We have universities that are giving out laptops on some kind of payment model with students. So what interventions must universities also do to make sure that e-learning is a possibility and a must in Africa? Dr. Padman, if you can hear me, please take over. Thank you.
Did you send it to me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Fredman, yes,
sorry.
Thank
you very
Fredman.
much.
Great.
I think that thank you very much for giving all the perspectives from Africa. I think I will go back to the more global perspective. And I'm keen on saying all the time that what we have learned now from the COVID, and which is there from the beginning, is that we have to cooperate, we have to collaborate all over the world, because this is not, I'm worried about that we are finding solution in each part of the world and not thinking about that we have to be connected everywhere. And of course, e-learning and not e-learning only, but just using online to using technology is something that we all have to go forward with. And I will give some response from the survey we did and around the world. And one of the most important things is that there is a very, very high willingness from all over the world to cooperate and do things together and learn from each other for the future from this experience. And I think that is an opportunity we all should take care of. When we did this survey, as I said before, it was in a certain period during this spring. And we have done it globally, but also regionally. And when the survey is there, you can find it on the homepage, and there will be a regional analysis. And in general, there are very much of common views around the world, but Africa stands out in some of these issues. And in particular, the capacity and the infrastructure for going online as compared with many other countries. So yes, some highlights from that is people are worried about the current situation for students because how do they finalize this semester? Do they have money to come back and continue if they don't finalize their studies now? They are worried about the exams, and that is an issue for going online for the future also. That how do you guarantee the integrity, but also the quality of these exams? And in particular, in the rush, everyone went from traditional on-campus education and exams and then into the online, and there is a great worry for this. And when we got the report, they say that 80% of those responding say that they are planning to fulfill the exams for the semester, while in Africa, 60% says that there is a risk for not completing the exams this semester. So there is a large effect on the students already this semester, which we will have to cover up for the future and for their own sake. The next thing that people are bringing up, or institutions are bringing up, is the enrollment of students for the next coming years, and due to the health situation, but also to the financial situation. So 80% is expecting impact on the enrollment for the next academic year. And that includes both national and international students. And there is also something from the global perspective. 89% thinks that there will be an impact on mobility of international students, while the answers from Africa is that 85% does not foresee any impact. We have to look at that because probably it's some misunderstanding. It sounds very clear. Also, the universities, as you say, they are building now strategies and actions to go more online for the future also. But and I know that many universities around the world are planning for online education also for the next semester or maybe the whole next academic year. Financial problem is something which is raised everywhere, and in particular that if the enrollment goes down, that many higher education institutions are depending on tuition fees for their economy. And if there is a loss of national, but in particular of international students, there will be a great financial loss for the institutions. And they fear that the students, international students, does not dare to apply for new education abroad due to the situation right now. And what is raised by the higher education institution is that from this, we have to rethink internationalization, not just for the next academic year, but for the future. We probably won't see that much of mobility. And at the same time, internationalization is a basic and given part of higher education. So we have to see to that we continue to have that, and that is also quality perspective of higher education. Then also people are worried about the economic consequences in the society, so that there will be more of socioeconomic inequality among those becoming students. The very rapid transformation to the online was, of course, a way to save the students to have education. And as you said before here, I mean, you had universities who were already doing very much online, and they have the pedagogy, and they have all the equipments, they have everything. So that was not a problem. While others have not at all done the online before. And what comes up is not only the availability of technical infrastructure. And I can say that even in a country like Sweden, where you think that everyone has internet and all this, it still became a problem because not all people are living. Even in Sweden, they are living very, very many people in the same flat, and that is very, very difficult for those students to go on with their studies. So there are inequality in many perspectives. Distance learning, the competence from the teachers and pedagogists has to be developed. They were not prepared for this, and they are overloaded now with work, and so that is a problem, and we have to work with that. That's not just Africa. And then, which has not been raised here, is that online is not suitable for all kinds of disciplines. Some disciplines need more personal interactions. And what I have heard, and also from the survey, is that in general, one thinks about having online as a combination with campus education, and that there will be more of blended learning. there are also perspectives coming from individuals that there is a need of this personal interaction, which is important on the campus. So I think that that's something we have to bring forward for the students also. Partnership, I would like to mention, and that is we have to partner with each other. And there are many higher education institutions, not at least in Africa, sending the message that the partnership with other higher education institutions, in particular in other regions, is decreasing. And that is a very bad sign, according to what should happen with sharing knowledge, to be able to also take responsibility for the knowledge needed for sustainable development goals. And finally, people are bringing up concerns about research, and that there is less of partnership. Also that the COVID led to that research is not being done. And for higher education, I would say that research is a very important component of having higher education and for bringing the students the last knowledge. So we have to keep an eye on also how research is going to be developed and that no one is left behind. So that was a short message of the survey, and I hope that you can take part of it on the website, and also that encourage you to answer the next time the survey is coming out, because this is, we're doing this together with a lot of organizations around the world. So it is to provide knowledge, to share knowledge, and also to be part of developing for the future of higher education. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fredman. I really appreciate the fact that you want us to collaborate globally and then also build stronger partnerships. And that is very important. And together we will be able to solve most of the challenges and learn from one another. And that is a very good perspective, because we do not want to reinvent the wheel. We have other institutions that are doing excellently well, and we can learn from them as well, whether it's based in Africa or outside Africa. We need to build that synergy and common platform to learn from one another. And I think that is very fantastic and excellent. All right, thank you so much. We want to go to Dr. Kosam, and you would want to give us, yes, this is the era we are in now. We cannot afford to lag behind. 5 key steps, 5 key things that you want us to do for policy. I think I asked that question in your earlier submission, but maybe your final words in this regard before we go to the Q&A. Thank you.
It all depends on the structure of the system of regulation of higher education in a country. I know in some countries, regulatory bodies are a department in the Ministry of Education. In some countries, such regulatory bodies are independent bodies. But all in all, we need to start at really the ministry level, whether the regulatory body is a department or is an independent body. We need government policy reforms, right from the highest policy level, to acknowledge and appreciate that open and distance education is the way to go, not only for COVID-19 period, but even for future delivery of higher education. Because in some countries, I know where they started with open universities, students who came out of open universities were regarded as of lower quality as compared to those who came from campus-based learning. So I think we need that kind of mindset change and the policy reforms at the highest government level. And then when it comes to regulatory bodies, again, I think I'll repeat it again. If you look at the current regulation of, especially requirement for accreditation of program and the institution, they focus more on physical things like the acreage, the space where the institution or the university is occupying, the size of classes, the size of library, laboratories, etc., etc. I think it's high time now to appreciate that learning, or not all learning necessarily need the physical requirement. I agree with the previous speaker that not all learning can be accommodated through open and distance learning, especially the technology-based, laboratory-based, but still we need to appreciate that when it comes to regulation, let the regulatory bodies make policy reforms to accommodate the new trends or the requirement for open and distance learning, to ensuring that quality assurance also at the regulatory level takes care of open and distance learning. That again requires that at institutional level, at universities or higher learning institutions, again, we need policy reforms that universities also should ensure that at institutional level, all policies regarding to quality assurance takes care of all provide for open and distance learning, especially now that maybe after COVID, the big lesson that we learn is that blended learning would be the way forward to combine both face-to-face and the e-learning or open and distance learning. So we need to ensure that our institutions provide for in their policies or in the regulation that from level of the academic unit, from department, faculties, maybe colleges up to university level, all the policies ensure that they takes care of provision of quality assurance related to open and distance learning. The other aspect that I thought should be an important aspect, I think that covers both at regulation, at regulatory bodies and the universities, the issue of capacity building. Not everybody would appreciate and understand how important e-learning or open and distance learning is unless we take through a rigorous capacity building, especially when we have a new policy reforms or new regulations. There's a need to capacity build. All people will be dealing with regulation of higher education. And I think the other issue is I think I already mentioned it, the issue of advocacy and mindset change. I think it's the high time now that we also engage all stakeholders in higher education to appreciate that e-learning is equally as good as campus-based or face-to-face learning. And that needs a lot of interaction, of participation from the ministry level policy decision makers in higher education, managers of higher education, student leaders, parents, students, etc., etc. So there's a lot of need for engaging policymakers, all levels of stakeholders when it comes to participation or interaction of all of these, in all these aspects that we are talking about. And the last aspect that I think is important to share with you on policy issues. We need high-level policy at government level to engage with the internet providers, telecommunication companies, and higher education institutions, and how this partnership can ensure that there is internet access to internet and the internet penetration, so that we are not leaving out students who are coming from remote areas where access to internet is very limited, because this is all a part of quality assurance. We're now looking at infrastructure of quality of delivery of education through e-learning, by ensuring that there is easy access or equality on access to education. I'll give an example of Kenya. Kenya, the government of Kenya has entered into partnership with Safaricom. This is one of the telecom providers in Kenya. This company has entered into government whereby Safaricom provide free bandwidth or airtime to students to access education materials from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, from universities, so that at least they make sure that access to educational materials is not a challenge to students. But again, another issue is how do we put in place so that we ensure that access to computers, iPad, or mobile phones are easily accessible to students. This needs the policy intervention at the government level, where government provide incentives or tax rebate to people who are selling computers and other resources to ensure that these materials are easily accessible to all students of different background. So this is all what I can contribute for now regarding policy issues on making sure that we move forward and ensure that e-learning or open and distance education becomes the only solution, not only for COVID-19, but even beyond the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you once again for inviting me to share with you my experiences regarding to quality assurance of e-learning and open educational resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kosam. This is more than enough. I think you've really hit on very salient points. And just quickly, on the blended learning, and that is one of the interventions that the Association of African Universities is also putting across, where they have a vision in the next 5 years, all universities on the continent must have blended approach to teaching and learning. Yeah. So not only the face-to-face, but we need to make sure. And we are still looking at the issues of accreditation. How do we still value? And all of you have made crucial and important point that has to do with capacity building and mindset change on the continent for us to value online-based teaching and learning as much as we want to put premium on the face-to-face as well. Thank you so much. I think right after this webinar,
maybe one recommendation to all Africa Students Union, maybe it should lobby with the African Commission of African Union to make it, this is an agenda of the continent. Because sometimes lobbying from such continental level as an agenda which will go into policies of Africa, so that it will trickle down to our governments, down to the institutions.
Absolutely.
Okay,
great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. We want to move to take the final remarks from Admin. It's very important. We're talking about capacity building. You represent the student session. We're talking about capacity building. And anytime we are hosting such discussions and we talk about capacity building, we leave behind the capacity building for students, because it is teaching and learning. There is no learning without teaching, and there's no teaching without learning. The two go hand in hand. Do you think that students need some support to be able to migrate or to adapt or accept or be efficient in online teaching? If there are, what are the 5 steps, or what are the 5 key support that you think students globally would need? For example, they've mentioned a lot, but let's hear from you, the student perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, as you've mentioned, capacity building is very important in such a crisis, you know, in whatever crisis or pandemic we're facing. So collaboration, partnership is very important, as we're always talking of going global, okay, internationalization of education. This is very important, being in partnership with different stakeholders so that we can get ideas from them and then we can consolidate on our system. Talking of student, you know, capacity building among students, this is something which is tremendously important here, because as I mentioned, there is a lack of student voice, you know, there is a lack of student empowerment in the system. This COVID-19 crisis has occurred. It is an unprecedented, you know, situation. One expected that to happen. Students didn't expect that to happen. But then those students, they are at a point of time where they feel that they don't have enough support. You know, they do not have enough support from, let's say, the institution. Institutions are here, yes. Institutions are providing online teaching and learning, yes. But are the student able to cope with that, you know, with that teaching and learning setting, which we call e-learning? Are they able to grasp maximum of that setting? This is a huge question which is faced in most of the African countries, you know, because even like I said here in Mauritius, we have students having limited resources. Not all students have, you know, digital resources, have good internet or Wi-Fi capacity. here in Mauritius, the government is trying to improve the Wi-Fi capacity. So people in all strategic points, you know, the Wi-Fi capacity has been increased. But despite that effort, there are not, you know, all students who are able to make the maximum of this because they do not even have, you know, internet capacities. If you don't have internet capacity, how can you make the most of increased, you know, Wi-Fi? So it's of no use of them. So these students, we can see that there is like a digital divide. You know, there is a gap between students who have been able to make the maximum of that digital learning. So they have accelerated their digital learning, while there are students who are not able to even learn, you know, during these 2 or 3 months. So there is a digital gap which has been created. Now, if we have an appropriate platform for students, okay, if we have appropriate platform where students can voice out their different constraints, or there is capacity building, I think it would have been of great use for those students, because there are many students, if I take example for university students or even secondary students, they keep on asking themselves the question, what will happen, you know, in the future? Do I have to pay for tuition fees? Do I have to, will I be graduated? This is the question of final year students. Am I going to be graduated? And what will happen when I will be graduated? Will I have a job after graduation? Is there job security in the market? You know, because we're facing economic, there is a loss of economic growth. We're declining in economic growth right now. So we don't have security of their job. This is something, so having probably, you know, capacity building, having a platform for learners could have probably helped them, you know, in their well-being. We keep on talking about wellness, well-being of learners. We have online platforms giving, you know, webinars going on whereby you have the stay safe and stay sane, you know, webinars going on where we talk about, you know, promoting wellness of these students. But are we doing, you know, other things which can just like give them certainty? Because there is a lot of uncertainty here in the system. Students are constantly being questioning, you know, where the system is going on and what is there in the future, what is there for them. But one thing that the COVID-19 has taught us, you know, a positive lesson that has come out from here is that students have been able to understand, you know, the importance of a classroom. I mean, this is something which is very important, because we have a lot of students, university students, secondary students, who keep on saying that, you know, we don't want to go to school today. I don't want to go to university today because, you know, it's boring, or we have a lot of work to do. But it's these students themselves who are saying that I wish I could go to school. You know, I wish I could be within those 4 walls. I wish I could be in contact with the educator, because they believe that, you know, they gain better knowledge out there. Well, it's not the case. It's definitely not the case, but at least we know that this COVID-19 has taught our students the importance, you know, of that physical teaching and learning setting, which we call the classroom. This is very important. Now, when we talk of, you know, student voice is very important, yes. But one thing which is also important is also the teacher's voice. Okay, this is also very important. How can we talk of students' voice, students' empowerment, when the educators themselves are not empowered? Okay, so this brings us to something which is very important, which one of our colleagues mentioned, which is the continuous professional development of educators. Okay, so training of educators is very important, because during this crisis, we have been able to note that there is a lack of training among educators. Government keep on doing, you know, continuous professional programs for educators about the different ways to teach. But has there been CPDs for educators to be able to cope with online teaching? Have they been given appropriate training to use the different softwares? This is not the case. They are now being given the training, but they were not given that at the start of this crisis. This is also something, and I think this COVID-19 has also taught us, to bring a real paradigm shift in pedagogical, strategies, where now I think it's time for us to really to bring a shift from the teacher-centered classroom to go towards a more learner-centered classroom. We keep on talking about, ICT integration, learner-centered teaching, blended learning in the national curriculum framework, or big documents like that. But we were not, really implementing those. So now probably with the COVID-19, it's a real opportunity so that we can really apply this. Because here we see the importance of child-centered learning. Here we see the importance of ICT integration. Just imagine a society which don't have, internet facilities. That society is completely paralyzed during this crisis. That society is not able to do anything, during this, because we are fully towards e-learning. So it brings us also to a thought that the government have to self-reflect upon upon the curriculum, the existing curriculum, self-reflect upon the policies, reinforce policies so that there is rigorous protection for the marginalized students, reinforce policies so that, there is equal opportunities, reinforce policies so that we can go towards the SDG 4, which is providing equal, inclusive, and quality education to all. So yes, student platform is very important. Capacity building is very important, but we also have to ponder upon these things. Where are we going right now? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know what to say. This has been very exciting, full of knowledge and experience as well. I wonder why e-learning, we have to talk more about it, because now even our transport system, we have e-transport, everything is e, but learning, we are still struggling. I'm sure maybe Professor Goski and the rest, when we get another platform, will tell us why it's so difficult for academics to understand the e aspect of education. But as we will still move on, we have our last presenter to give us a few of her closing remarks before we read a comment and questions from our participant. Finally, Lina, you are the Vice President of the All Africa Student Union, that is for West Africa, and currently you are pursuing your PhD, which is very fantastic. But I would want you to respond to issues of advocacy on behalf of students. ASU within this period has done a lot of policy-based webinars. They've done a lot of communication. But what do you think we need to do in the space of 5 minutes in terms of advocacy for students in this era and even beyond?
Okay, thank you once more, and thank you for giving me the platform again. I think the other speakers have exhausted probably everything I had in mind. But I'm just going to say that, talking from this perspective of a student, there's that time where we talked about the triple helix, where there was this communication between the state, the university, and the enterprise, whereby the state gives to the university and the university gives to the students and send them back to the enterprise where they could be productive. And if we are talking about the fourth education revolution, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Now is how we are going to structure our system to reach that level. And as a student, I think we do not have to focus only on our managers, school administrators, but I think the whole stakeholder, the whole system needs to be discussed by every other person who is involved, the students, the community, the state, the school authorities, in order for us to achieve this fourth educational revolution. And again, I think like the other speakers spoke about blended learning, or if you like to say hybrid learning, it should be a system where we are able to enforce this blended learning For instance, it should be like a strategic priority whereby we do not have to use it as a complement, use it as a substitute, I meant to say. It should just complement the system of education. Earlier on, I talked about anticipation, and we all know that education happens to be the backbone of the development of every society. And this crisis has proven that we have neglected some areas of research, like I said earlier on, and it has reached a point where our managers, our administrators should be able to adopt adaptive strategies to be able to face such challenges in the nearest future. For instance, university managers should be able to facilitate partnership between the institution and high-tech companies to set up digital incubators. When we talk about this digital incubator, should be able to help students or support students to develop digital learning tools. For instance, the University of Oslo came up with a Talk Wall. It is a micro-blogging tool for engaging students in collective classroom interaction. In Cameroon too, for instance, there's a student who came up with a platform known as the Network. We all know about the socio-economic crisis that we have in Cameroon, in the English and French, in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon. And this student has used this platform to bring students together from different institutions in order for them to interact easily on their forthcoming exams. So I think that another aspect, talking as a student, is we should be able to, the state, in collaboration with the universities and digital, network, internet network or mobile companies should be able to create free curriculum data learning platform, whereby study materials can be posted on these platforms and students can access it free. I mean, they're given a code, probably a code to log in to get their academic materials. It also goes to students in the remote areas who cannot have access to internet, but whose parents are in possession of mobile phones. In that way, nobody is left out. I'm going to say that is Africa ready and capable of withstanding this artificial intelligence? I'll say yes. Africa is very ready, and we need to join forces, put hands on deck and resources to digitalize the educational system worldwide and Africa in particular. Thank you. That was my submission. Thank you. I'm happy to have.
Thank you very much, Lena.
Yeah.
Great. Wow. Wherever you are, I think you can just put your hands together for our panelists. They've done fantastic, excellent information, very factual, and it's going a long way to transform or add that to what we have been talking about every time. We want to take few comments from social media platforms and questions that have come in. I think this is coming from Owusu Minta, and he says, I believe that e-learning training should be provided to all educators. Open distance learning should be encouraged. We agree with you, Owusu Minta. Most teachers lack e-learning skills in sub-Saharan Africa. Professor Dr. Raju, he joined us from India. Yes, we agree with you. Some of them do, and we need to do more. I would like to stay in touch with participants who are keen to solve their present problems in shifting from face-to-face to ODL and also the online. That is coming from Professor Raju, and he has been, or he is a vice chancellor or a chancellor emeritus outspace. He has his email address, his WhatsApp number on the platform. If you would want to engage with him, that would be very good. This is also coming from Getu, and Getu says that in Ghana, recent academic audits undertaken by the government in some public universities never recognize online PhD degree certificate, especially from Caribbean countries. Any suggestions by Professor Goski? Professor Goski, this is a question for you. Any suggestions? And this is coming from Professor S.B. Osuminta, CCTU, that is Cape Coast Technical University, Cape Coast, Ghana. Access to internet is the main obstacle to e-learning systems in Africa, followed by poor skills, lack of resources, lack of experience, poor quality, and etc. This is especially for undergraduate students because undergraduate students are unlikely to have facility to access e-learning. In Ethiopia, all postgraduate students started attending the education via online learning system, but undergraduate students are not and will not start online courses because of mainly lack of internet access to every corner of the country and lack of resources. That is sad to know from Ethiopia, but I believe that they are still improving the system. We have Dr. Kosam here, maybe he could add a voice to that. Let's still keep some messages going in. Policy with regards to online universities and education in general needs to be a priority for Africa at this point, and that is coming from Magoni. I also don't know how e-learning would work out with those lessons that require students need to participate in thorough experiment or hand-on works. I'm sure Professor Goski, who is the president of Lawe Open University, and then Dr. Fredman will be able to respond to that, how we should, or how easy or possible it is to engage in those hard science using online resources. As for the case of my country, Malawi, some of the anticipated challenges of e-learning include, among others, one, cost of learning include, sorry, did I get it well? One, cost. Internet in Malawi is very expensive. Two, network infrastructure. Network operators in Malawi do not adequately cover most. That is true, and that is also coming. Right, so these are the few questions and comments that are in. I think we had about 2 questions from that. Let me go to another platform and see. This is coming from Stephen Ampa. How possible will it be for students with no IT skills to enjoy this digital world? And that is coming from Stephen Ampa. And I think any of our panel members can respond to that. The next, probably we would want to find out from International Association of Universities, from Professor Goski and UNESCO on how they intend to engage student unions like ours moving forward to ensure the delivery of quality education, even under such circumstances. I'm sure we would respond to that in the closing remarks by our keynote speaker. That will be done shortly.
I need to leave for another meeting at 2 minutes.
Okay, all right. So can you give us 1 minute your closing remarks, some of the questions that came from the floor, and then you can excuse us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have appreciated this discussion, and it brings a lot of information also for me as the president from IAU. And I would like to answer the question about the student engagement, which is a concern, and I brought this to the table many times. I don't have the solution because IAU, as a membership organization, cannot do it themselves. But I'm very willing to support if there is activities of student unions around the world, how to find a global platform and more interactions between the students, because your voice will be very, very important to bring this forward and get to the trust and recognition from governments and from society for promoting higher education. So you are welcome to come back. I'm very positive to this, even though IU cannot be the platform for it, but your influence is very important for us. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this webinar. And thank you everyone who has been around. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We'll engage with you privately. Yes, so Professor Goski, if you are available, you can respond to some of the few questions that came to you, and any of our panel members can also do justice to any question that came to you as well. Thank you. Very brief, 1 minute, 2 minutes, we are done.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think with the first question about the perceptual challenges, this is where we need to call on our policymakers and regulators to ensure that they build confidence in the system. Because when we frown as regulators and policymakers on open and distance education, then we are telling the general public that it's not good enough for them to embrace it. So it is time for our regulators and our policymakers to rise to the occasion and ensure that they build that confidence in open and distance education. And then there was another question with respect to the students' engagement. Is it? So with respect, yes. So with respect to that, I believe that, first of all, open and distance education allows learners to combine workplace learning or work environment learning with any life experience to the formal classroom-based education that they get, which means that this offers the opportunity to experiment. So you don't just need to think that you are working in a confinement, but then once you're working with the entire practical environment, you can experiment anywhere. And also, before students begin any engagement on the digital platforms, they are trained. For example, at Lawa Open University, we have a course called Digital Citizenship. And this course is a whole semester course, which is done 3 months prior to when students would actually start their course. And it trains them in how to apply the digital tools and how to behave and engage in a digital world and a digital age. Thank you very much for the opportunity once again.
Thank you very much, Professor Goski Alabi. We would go to our keynote speaker, Mr. Bohin, and he will give us some few responses and then his final remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this opportunity for engagement, also for it's a learning opportunity for all of us, I believe, on this perspective and the discussion that is coming, and the way you kindly pushed us toward being more concrete in terms of the proposal and suggestion. I think it's very good, and that's what we expect from the students, not to have just what we say blah blah blah, but more about what concrete actions can be taken. I think it's important. Maybe I would like first of all to say that I'm calling to the union to join the global coalition, because I think it's important that your voice is heard, and I would be very pleased to have you on board. That would be a way also to amplify the message that we have been discussing today. Second, I think we spoke about the partnership, but it's obviously clear that ministries of education, universities alone will not solve the problem to leave no one behind. We need this broader coalition of actors, be it at the global, at the continental, or at the national, or even at the local level. And in the discussion, we mentioned few of them. In addition to the education stakeholders, we need telecom operators, because if we want to solve the issue of connectivity, this is something that would require infrastructure investment and intervention, which require the telecom operator and broadly those actors that have influence on infrastructure. We need also, and I think it's very important, there is a risk that, and we are speaking in Africa, there is a risk that Africa becomes the supermarket of the online learning. So it's important that we develop the local capacities, that we develop the local ecosystems. And again, this is not only teachers or faculties, it's a range of stakeholders that have to be involved. It's a content editor, it's publisher, it's startups that work on ed tech. So it's important that the growth serves the local, and that all the benefit from the booming of the education technologies is also anchored at the national level. Otherwise, we turn Africa, in this case, as a consumer of what Google, what Microsoft, what others are producing. And it's important that we develop the local ecosystems. And I think it's possible. There are countries who are doing well. Kenya is doing well. Senegal is doing well. And we have excellent center that can contribute to it. We have Tanzania University, we have the Open University in Senegal again, and we have other examples that probably you know better than me. So it's important to think about this multi-actor, multi-stakeholders, but also think about the local ecosystem and how we will develop that and how we'll enrich that. And that happens through awareness about the importance of investing in capacities. It comes also through investment, because you need resources to make it happen. And obviously, it comes with the advocacy that it requires. And we have stakeholders in this call today and the webinar that can influence that. And I think there was a suggestion that this has to go to the policy level. Obviously, your voice have to reach the highest policy level. Otherwise, it remains among ourselves, and that's not the point. And of course, UNESCO's role is to do so. We have been offering spaces and opportunities for youth to contribute, but it's not sufficient. We need action from different parts. Maybe the last point, I think, which is important, I think the discussion and the colleague from Mauritius mentioned this, and it's important to think, the connectivity will not solve all the problems. When you are student and poor, it's not only connectivity, it's the well-being, it's potentially that you are working to have revenues to continue studying. And this was my case when I was a student, and I'm sure many of our audience today are in the same case. So when you are obliged to sit at home or in the campus, you have no capacity to have revenues, to survive. So the connectivity shouldn't hide other socioeconomic problems, and we need to think about that. And it's about scholarship, it's about support to students' well-being. But what is important, and again, I'm sorry to repeat something that I said in the beginning, there is a risk. We are entering into recession. We are in a recession. This is a fact. And that means that the public resources will shrink. The public expenditure will shrink. And mechanically, even if the education resources are not shrinking as part of the proportion of the public expenditure, mechanically they will shrink because the public expenditure will shrink. Your voice is critical in protecting the investment and the financing on education in the context of the recession, in the context of the stimulus packages that are now set up, in the context of the support that countries are receiving from IMF, World Bank, etc. It's important that your voice about protecting the right to education, but also protecting the resource to education is heard. Let me stop there. Thank you very much for this opportunity to engage. And it's always a pleasure to engage with youth, because that's how we remain youth as ourselves as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Shako. Before you go, we would want you to know that the All Africa Student Union has already applied to join the coalition, and we have received emails from you, from your end, but we want to put our voice through you, that you could facilitate the process for us as well.
We'll do. I'm the responsible, okay. So I will do it immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective with us as well. Have a good day. All right. We are still with the answering period. If there is any facilitator who has a submission, Prof. Goski.
Yes. Thank you very much. Just to add that the ACDE, the African Council for Distance Education, the Lawa Open University, and the All African Students Union are planning to start a workshop series, Readiness, which would put out there some form of capacity building and also guidelines and policies that can help in shaping both the quality and also the access to open and distance education. And so we would be making the dates available very soon, and we look forward to the active participation of all who are interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Goski. Dr. Kosam, do you have any feedback for us? Lena, any feedback? Admini, any feedback?
Yeah, I have a feedback, please. I have a comment.
Very, very quick, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to reiterate that for us to achieve this e-learning, because there's a question that came up, that what about those who do not have knowledge about this technology. We have to go back to the grassroots level, to our communities, and identify these vulnerable children who are unable to have access to computer or digital knowledge. And this can be done by establishing maybe high-tech institutions in these communities, whereby they can send in trainers to train people who are not yet versed with this digital age, for them to be able to not to be left behind. That's what I had to say, that we go back to the grassroots level to try and see how we can help the less privileged, the vulnerable children, especially the girl child. That is what I have. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for the organizers. Thank you to the Mr. Peter Kosikwaji for this webinar. It's been insightful and I've gained a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lina. It's been interesting and exciting also hosting you as well. Dr. Kosam, any final remarks?
Yes, maybe there was a question, I think, was it from Malawi, about the cost of internet?
Absolutely.
Yes, I want to repeat what I said earlier, that looking at the fight of COVID-19, it needs participation of different stakeholders. What's happening, for example, in East Africa, different organizations, companies, they're making a lot of contribution in terms of food, money, vehicles, etc., to the government to support the fight against COVID-19. So it's upon the government now to negotiate with telecommunication companies as part of their social responsibilities or their contribution to fight COVID, that they are providing either concession to the cost of internet, the bandwidth, or they give it for free. They provide free internet to higher education institution, or to higher learning institution, or to any learning institution. I gave an example of Kenya, where students from primary schools are given access to the learning materials for free by Safaricom. So this could happen. It depends on the government policy and how they negotiate with telecommunication companies or internet providers. So that's the experience I wanted to add to the question from Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Padmini, do you have anything to say? You are the final person.
Yes. So what I just want to say is that, when the lockdown is over and school resumes, we just hope that the curriculum or the school, becomes more gender responsive. It becomes more gender responsive and more inclusive, because we don't have to forget that there are many marginalized students, many girls who are being deprived, of quality education during this lockdown. So ensuring that school becomes more inclusive and more gender responsive will be very helpful for these students. Probably government can also try to reconsider the school calendar or restart a term, so that students who lost, who were deprived from digital learning or e-learning, can at least cope, or they can catch up with their studies and they don't lose, so that they can sit for their exams and then gain better results at the end of the day. This is just what I have to say.
All right, thank you so much. Excellent facilitators. When I was in school, I wasn't too good at taking notes, but let me see if I did a better job today. I think out of this discussion, we've had some solid points for advocacy and also for e-learning, open education, which is very important. And this must be done in partner of the product of our university. And also, it is important for us to know that e-learning is just a teaching, just as we do for face-to-face. Government must invest in e-learning, make it accessible, reliable, and affordable for all students. and also build capacity. This has gone through the entire conversation, build capacity, not only for academics, also for students as well. And the need for change management in our universities. So we have students and faculty who are resisting to this change. We need to make sure that there is a change management. Collaboration is very important. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of online resources and platforms within this period. We need to make sure that we join our hands together and not work in isolation. There's also the need for us to respond to most of the financial constraint that our students are facing and our universities as well. Partnership is very important. Change of mindset, very key. Blended learning is the next thing that we need to do post-COVID. Every university on the continent must subscribe to blended learning, and that is the way to go. Capacity building, high-level policy engagement, and that is what All Africa Student Union is doing, making sure that right after this webinar, there is synthesis session, information is being shared with ministers and key stakeholders on the continent. We need to also make sure that we have the student voice, and the student voice is heard throughout the whole sessions, and also empowerment from them as well. Constant CPDs for teachers is very, very important. We cannot have e-learning efficiently if we do not engage our academics as well. Gender responsiveness is very important. So these are the key messages that we have shared today, beside the statistics that we have received on internet connectivity, access to internet to those of us in Africa and the continent. On behalf of the Secretary General of the All Africa Student Union, His Excellency Peter Koji, I would like to thank everyone who has joined us today for this. All right. Before I say goodbye, I would want to hear from All Africa Student Union. Do they have any message for all of us before we can end the session? So Samuel, if you are online, do you have any special message for us before we call it a day? For change management in our universities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sam. And thank you very much to all of our speakers for the wonderful delivery today. We are very grateful, and we certainly believe that the submissions made today will certainly influence our next steps of actions in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, quickly, just a quick one, we are currently, among other things, conducting the world's biggest student survey on sustainability. That is a research into students' attitudes and opinions towards sustainability, climate change, their education, and their jobs. We'll be glad if all students can jump on this and help us take this research. Once again, we are grateful to all speakers and for participants for making time to join in for this discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel Adontin. Thank you, Professor Goski. Thank you, Dr. Kosam. Thank you, Padmini. Thank you, Lena, and all participants who have joined. My name is Kwesi Sam, and I work with the Association of African Universities. I'm in charge of student affairs here at AAU. It's been a nice time engaging with you today. Have a good day, and together, let us transform higher education in Africa.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay, so thank you everyone so much. Now we are off. We are no more live. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Today has undoubtedly been one of our best webinar so far. The feedback is great, and what we'll be doing is that we'll be putting together a document, a policy brief on this webinar, and then afterwards we'll share it with everyone for your consideration. Once again, on behalf of the Secretary General, we are grateful, and we look forward to engaging you more in the next few months or days. Thank you so much, Dr. Kosam. Thank you,
Samuel.
Padmini Jaya.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Lena. Thank you,